And again, the topic is fear. The person on Instagram said, talk about being afraid of pregnancy and birth. So I guess the first thing I would say is that it's important to understand that fear in general is not necessarily our enemy. Fear is something that's built into us as a way of warning us or motivating us to respond when something is wrong. Now, the problem comes when we become afraid of something that isn't actually a threat. So in answering this question about fear of birth, I want to talk about the fact that sometimes we perceive birth as being more of a threat than it really is. And so our fear isn't appropriate or isn't like founded in reality. It isn't rooted in something real. But then secondly, even the fears that are there that might have some basis in reality, we can still kind of befriend them and work with them. So I think the first step, if you're noticing that you have fear around being pregnant or giving birth or any of that process of entering motherhood, is that you have to decide you're going to look at it. And that instead of just letting it float around in your mind like this vague gray cloud of dread, that you're going to sit down with it and you're going to look it in the face and kind of take inventory, right? You're going to sit down and say, oh, hey, fear. Okay, I see you. Let's have a talk. I almost like to imagine that fear is sitting in a chair across from me and I'm like, you are not going to intimidate me. Let's talk. What do you need to tell me right now, fear? So you're kind of inviting this conversation with your fear so that you can glean from it whatever it is that it's trying to give to you. And so then you have to kind of dissect it. Like, what exactly am I afraid of? Is it something as general as I'm scared that I won't be able to handle pain? Is it something as specific as I don't want to tear? Like a lot of women, that's a very common fear, by the way. Tearing is a very common fear. Do you have a weird dread feeling that your baby's going to be born with a birth defect? Are you worried about losing your body shape and like your relationship with your body changing? Are you nervous that you won't be supported well enough after you have a baby? Are you scared that you're not going to be a good mom? Are you scared that the people that you need to support you during your birth won't be able to support you for some reason because they're not available practically or emotionally or whatever? So dissect it. Pick apart the fear and make it really specific instead of it being just a vague general dread feeling, you know? And I would recommend putting it on paper, because putting something on paper kind of like takes its power away a bit. I think that you're naming it, you're giving words to it, and you're externalizing and taking it outside of your head, putting it down somewhere else other than in your headspace. So maybe when you're done having this little chat with your fear, you're going to have a list on paper of the things that you are specifically scared of. And then what you can do with that list is you can pick up each one individually and ask yourself some follow-up questions. Okay, what are the facts about this fear? Do I need to learn more about something in order to make this fear go away? Do I need to gather more resources to shrink this fear down? What work do I need to do with this specific fear so that it doesn't have a stranglehold on me anymore, you know? And you almost have to get just really strategic and really specific. And then I find as you're doing this, you'll probably notice that the fear is already shrinking. But if there's those ones that linger, it just means you have to press in further. So I actually, in the Embrace Birth course, have an entire section about fears release. And there's like an exercise in there for you to go through that is not entirely different than what I'm saying right now. And that topic of fear comes up a lot in the Embrace course, because the truth is you do have to be pretty committed to saying goodbye to it and kicking it to the curb, because fear is a pretty big hindrance when you're trying to have a baby. Just in a literal physical sense, when we're scared, our muscles are tense, our heart rate is higher, and our blood pressure is higher, and we get into that fight or flight mode, and none of that helps you soften and open and relax enough to let a baby come out, you know? So you have to be pretty committed to like releasing fear's stranglehold on you. And it's so possible. But the truth is, we do live in a culture that has given us myriad images and stories from our childhood about birth being a horrifically scary thing. I mean, what do you picture when you first think about it? The movies, I mean, all you have to do is like do a little quick survey of popular media, like shows and movies, and it's almost always like this: water breaks in public place, woman screams, rushes to hospital, everybody's in a frenzy because it's this panicky emergency like situation. She ends up laying down on a bed. Her knees or legs are way up in the air, so she's spread eagle, and the doctors and the nurses, everyone can see her business, and she's screaming, and she's holding her husband's hand in a crushing way and yelling at him and telling, you did this to me, I hate you, I'm never touching you again. These are the messages that we're swimming in from childhood. So you're not weird if you struggle with fear around this issue, but you need to know that what you're seeing in those media portrayals is not the truth, and it is not normal, and it is not even common, and it's certainly not something that you should expect to have happen to you, or that it will look that way for you. So this is the next step then in releasing fear, is you have to replace all of those images and all of those messages and all those horror stories that you've heard. You have to start crowding them out by filling up your brain and your headspace with pictures, films, stories, and experiences that counter that give you an actual vision of what birth can be when it is undisturbed, when it is supported well, when a woman is respected, and when it is happening in a physiologically normal way, as opposed to this dramatized version on TV. So I think we have easy access to lots of positive birth imagery through birth photography. I mean, all you have to do is go to my blog and you can look through a million beautiful birth images. You can also go on YouTube and type in undisturbed birth, or type in natural birth, and you'll find a lot of films. I actually have a playlist on my YouTube that if you want to private message me, I'd be happy to send you a link to that. It's just full of birth films that I think paint a really beautiful and accurate, real picture of what birth actually is when it is working well and when it is not being disturbed or dramatized. You can also listen to podcasts. There's amazing birth podcasts out there with birth stories that are positive and that can kind of help you just get a different narrative going in your head. And I could also supply a list of podcasts for anyone who's interested in that. You just go searching for the good images and the good stories, and start, if a woman in your life, like your coworker or your great aunt or some random person you meet at the grocery store who thinks that your pregnant belly is her business, wants to tell you their horror story about birth, you can say, I don't really need to hear that right now. Thank you. I'm sorry that happened to you. And then also seek out women who've had positive birth experiences. I mean, heck, if you want to, you can get on your Facebook and say, who here had a great birth? Will you please tell me about it? I want to hear about it. And speaking of Facebook and utilizing social media, there's also a lot of great Facebook groups that you can join that tend to have a more positive view of birth. And that can be a great place to process your fears and questions and hear other people's positive stories and experiences. So to kind of recap, first, you're going to face your fear head on. You're going to befriend it and sit down and have a conversation with it. You're going to dissect it and break it down into specific pieces that you can address individually. And then you're going to reframe it. I actually forgot to expand on this one. But for every fear, write yourself a positive statement about it. So instead of, I'm so afraid of tearing, you could write, my perineum is stretchy and soft and lets my baby through without any trouble. Just reframe it. And then you're going to reprogram and re-wallpaper your mind with different images and stories and words about birth, and surround yourself with people who think birth is great and who loved doing it. And I think that with a little diligence, doing those things can significantly decrease fear. So I hope this has been helpful. And if you have further things to process or wanted that list of podcasts or my YouTube playlist, please just let me know and I will get it to you. Thanks so much, sisters. Have a great day.